evening. My name is Brian Herman. I work for the Beaufort County Planning Department, and as Mr. Brown said, there are several folks here in attendance that have been working. Can you all hear me in the back? With the, no? Okay. Yes. All right.
This one sounds better.
No. All right, here we go. How about that? Is that better? Okay. First of all, we'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. I know that it's not the funnest thing to do on a Monday night, especially after a weekend, but this really shows a great turnout, and it shows a great commitment to this island and the future of the island. Just real quickly, let me just introduce my colleague here. Rob Merchant works for Beaufort County the Planning Department, and he's the long-range planner. He's worked on a lot of our long-term plans in the county for a number of years. And then in the back, John Meeke from Opticos Design is here, all the way from Berkeley, California, actually. And him and his consultants and colleagues will be working on the island in a few weeks at a studio over at the Penn Center. And so hopefully we'll get to see everybody's face more intimately at those studios. Tonight we're just going to kind of go through this relatively quickly. Can I just see a raise of hands? How many people were here last time on the 3rd? Okay, so a little less than half, maybe. All right. Well, this is a kind of almost like a three-pronged process. So I'll try to kind of go through it as quickly as I can. Then the next thing we're going to do is towards the end, we'll actually go over the results of what we found from the group at the last meeting. We have a couple of exercises we'd like you all to help us do, where we're actually going to sit around maps and look at the different communities. The focus of tonight's community is actually the Scott community and also the Land's End community. The last meeting we actually were looking at the island-wide scale, at the entire island. So let me go ahead and get started. I guess if you leave here with one idea in your mind tonight, it's that place matters, and that's the key ingredient that we're trying to get across. And whether it's at the scale of your entire island, whether it's in your small community, or whether it's in actually on your family compound or on your lot, this is an extremely unique island, and has extremely unique communities and extremely unique heritage, culture, food, the building patterns. And so everything we're doing is trying to capture that and to the best of our knowledge allow that to be preserved and remain. So let's just keep that in mind. Obviously, you know where St. Helena Island is, and we just put this up here to show how massive the island is. It's extremely large, and so we've got to be, we have a lot of territory to deal with. Go ahead. And there are actually two tasks that the county is doing. Every 10 years we write what's called a comprehensive plan, where we write a plan for the entire county, and then as part of that comprehensive plan, the county's actually identified these smaller communities called community preservation districts around all throughout Beaufort County. There were 3 originally identified in 1997 here on St. Helena Island. They were the Corners community, Tansy Village, and the Land's End community. And so they were considered special enough in their culture and their heritage to actually receive their own plan separate from the larger county plan. And they basically, we set forth to someday write zoning specifically for those communities. And that's kind of what we're actually getting to now. Although the Corners community did write zoning about 10 years ago, and we've been updating that, and this is part of that updating process. So just to summarize, we're actually here to do a plan, and then out of that plan, we're hoping to get actual zoning. But the thing we want here from these meetings is planning. We want your vision for how you want this island to look in 20, 25 years. And so the thing that we're doing as a county department is we started at a very large scale with the whole county, and we're doing what we did was we identified these things called place types. You could just call them community types, It's just another word for that. But instead of just saying, oh, this is a node or a place that we recognize, we really try to identify what those places mean. And it's hard to see on here, but at the smallest one here is actually a, let's see, it's at a crossroads, and we have a rural, we identified some community stores, which you can see here on St. Helena Island. There are a number. We have what's called a rural crossroads, and then as you get more intense, you have what we've identified as, we call it a hamlet place type, and then we go up to what's called a village. As you go up the scale, you get more buildings, you get more intensity, the uses get a little more broad, and then you work your way all the way up to a town or a city. We don't have any towns or cities really in Beaufort County per se. Obviously there are the jurisdictions, the city of Beaufort and the town of Port Royal. So all we're concerned about on St. Helena Island are these little corner stores, rural crossroads, hamlets, and then maybe someday something as big as a village. But that's the extent of our concern. And you can see where we've actually identified them. The Corners community, as I said, was previously delegated as a CP, and so we've listed it as a hamlet. Land's End was already delegated as a community preservation district, and so we listed that as a hamlet. And then we actually are considering, part of the reason we're here tonight is listing the Scott community and that area as a hamlet as well. But we want to get your feedback on that. So go ahead. And here's just what I was actually just saying, more zeroed in kind of, so we can go to the next one. Just like, you know, your lot has specific standards and what can be done on it, or, you know, these actual place types or community types have standards, and we set out to try to identify what is the kind of the DNA, or what actually makes up these places. And so at the far left end of the spectrum would be the rural crossroads, the smallest, kind of something that you find all over this island. And then the second one here is the hamlet, and you can see the different types of buildings. But you could do this with everything. You could, or you could, not everything, but you could also list the, you know, what makes up a hamlet in terms of how big is it usually, and what uses are usually found in a hamlet. And those are all types of things that we're doing. And that's why we're here tonight, actually, is to find out what you all want in these, or don't want in these areas that we've designated as rural crossroads and hamlets on St. Helena Island. And we can go to the next one. Just real quick, you can see this is just our basic, this is what we're starting with, but we're here to gather information from you all. This is kind of our template. This is the way we see a rural crossroads, and we list some of the uses and what it might include. But this will all be updated and revised after we get input from you all. And so we had to start somewhere. And then the next one's a hamlet, as you can see, and then the next one is actually a village. And again, that's it for the majority of the county. You know, at this point, you're either in a town or a city, and so we're not concerning ourselves with those as much. Go ahead. One of the reasons, or a major reason we're actually doing this, and we're so focused on defining these hamlets and these place types, is that's where the county infrastructure dollars are actually spent, and where it makes the most sense to spend them. And so, you know, there are two ways you can develop. You can develop like this on the top here, where you're clustering development into these hamlets or these communities, and as a result, you know, if you have a community center or a school or some sort of infrastructure, it actually serves an identifiable community, something that, you know, you have a lot of identifiable communities on St. Helena Island. If we develop more in a pattern, something that, you know, you'll see down in a lot of southern Beaufort County, kind of the lots of freeways, and then the roads that are more of what we call cul-de-sacs. They kind of go out and just end in dead ends, but they don't actually have good connectivity. This is a very inefficient way as far as financially to provide services. And so when the county's sitting up in Beaufort and trying to decide where is money going to go, it behooves everybody on this island to continue to develop in the patterns that you all have traditionally. And so that's one of the things we're trying to explore, is to make sure that we continue to build on these patterns of communities like the island has always had. We don't want to get away from that. And just as an example of this infrastructure, the Scott community has a community center, and that's one of the reasons we looked at it. The Land's End community, as I said, was already identified, but there's a potential ferry landing there, and there's Fort Fremont, and so there's several pieces of community infrastructure that could possibly get funding from the county. So it makes sense to kind of consolidate our resources there. And then finally, again, the common destinations, I mentioned Fort Fremont, but you have up here just south of the Corners community, you have Penn Center, things like that. So there are these places that people already travel, and so it's good to actually expand on that instead of kind of just, again, trying to sprawl around, which isn't really very resourceful. This is kind of, if we were looking from an aerial view, if we were flying over the island in an airplane, this is what a lot of the current landscape looks like over here on the far left. This is what we're trying to actually avoid. This is kind of how a lot of Ladies Island started out. It started out as that, and then it slowly kind of stripped and developed like this. And what we would much prefer is to have these little nodes of development that actually make sense, and again are fiscally responsible and are connected, etc. Go ahead, Rob. If you break that down even further, you can see that if this was this school right here, and this is there's somebody who lives in this neighborhood over here. If you build in that kind of non-connective cul-de-sac manner, every time you want to go over to the school, you basically have to come out, go out on 21, go around, and come into the school. Same thing for somebody in an apartment. Even if you live here and you want to go visit your friend here, you got to come all the way out, come down here and around. It's just really, in terms of logic, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then in terms of providing services for the county, fire and police, etc., it's a lot more land and a lot more streets, or there's a lot more streets to cover when we have to cover everything, as opposed to a more connective network, which the next picture will show. If you have a more connected network, and again, if this were 21 here, if your school was centrally located and you kind of build neighborhoods around your school, if you live over here, you've got a couple different options on how you can get to school. It's very easy to visit all your friends. You don't ever have to come out on the 21. Same thing if you're up there in whether that's an office or whatever it may be up here in the far corner. But this kind of format is very easy to provide services to. It makes a lot of sense. It's cheaper as far as building, and it's traditionally the way people on this island and all throughout this area have built for decades. Go ahead. And so, we're talking at a very low scale here. That this island actually has one of the first things when we were walking around the island and talking to people. People talked about the family compounds and the very, very detailed kind of network of communities that exist. And so, if you were to put that into just a little graphic, again, consolidation of these resources as opposed to kind of spreading out where there's really no identity here. In this picture, everybody still maintains their identity. Every community on this island, that looks like this, hey, that's X community, that's Y, and that's Z, and they're very identifiable. If you just say you live in the middle of this thing or network, it's very hard, and you lose your community identity, and that's what we don't want to happen out here. And you can just see a real life shot of what happens so often as farmland gets sold off. We are fortunate enough on this island to have some tools to prevent this already. The cultural protection overlay is a tool that was put into place across the island to prevent some of the golf course communities and things like that. But part of this process is refining and updating that toolbox, because we still haven't gotten it quite right. And then as you see it, if you transform this over to this, again, it looks like a much more logical place. It looks like a true community where you could have farming and you can have houses of different types and sizes, and there's dirt roads, but they're still connected, and there's a field for kids to play on, and whereas this, I don't know, I guess these people go in somewhere in here, these kids go in here and throw the ball around or something, but it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Go ahead. These were just a couple of examples of, when this whole process is said and done, what a community might, when we finish zoning and everything, after a couple months, several months from now, you might have something on 21 that looked like that. Scott is a very low intensity area. It really is the essence of kind of a rural crossroads. And so these are just a couple examples I threw in there, and you want to go to the next one. These aren't meant to be, these are not literal, these are not from this island. They were just kind of to show an example of the type of eventual zoning or illustrative map that we would hope to have for these three communities. And this, obviously is on the water, and it kind of raises memories of Land's End. Go ahead. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, because the community stuff is really the more important thing to talk about at this point. But this form-based code that you've been hearing about, and that we're going to be using to kind of, or to work on hopefully on this island and put into place on this island is again, it says it's place-based, and it talks about how it emphasizes all these building types and dimensions and all this. But really, you can take all this fancy language, and really what it's saying is it goes in, when we put these form-based codes into effect, we try to go into the community, we try to talk to you all and ask you, what about your community do you like the most? What are the things out there? What buildings, what fences, what sidewalks, what stores, everything, services make the most sense and do you like the most? And then, once you've identified that and you say, this is what we want in the future, we try to write the code to make it very easy to replicate that in the future, so that we can help to create that vision in the future. And if you try to bring the stuff that doesn't meet your vision, we try to make it more difficult. And so that's why we're doing this, is to actually establish a community vision for these communities, and then actually write tools or write a zoning code that will allow that vision to occur. And this form-based code is actually a really good tool to do that.